Arcade 87. Let me make something else very clear to you. Dusty Rhodes, Barry Windham, the Road Warriors, Ric Flair, and this time of free agency.
When Ric Flair snapped for real, March 17, 2003, Monday Night Raw, St. Louis, Missouri, a private office backstage. Eric Bischoff is on a conference call. He's talking to his wife, his accountant, his lawyer. They're discussing property investments. It's a normal business conversation. Nothing unusual. The door opens. Ric Flair walks in. He's not alone. Arn Anderson is with him. So is Jonathan Coachman, a WWE producer. Bischoff looks up. He's confused. He thinks maybe this is a prank. Maybe it's a scripted segment he forgot about. He looks around for cameras. There are no cameras. Flair tells him to get up. Then Flair starts throwing punches. This is not part of the show. This is not kayfabe. This is not a wrestling angle. This is a real fight, a real assault, a real moment where one of the biggest stars in wrestling history attacked a co-worker in a corporate office. Bischoff tries to dodge. He knows martial arts. He's trained in kickboxing. But Flair is so angry that he bites his own lip. Blood runs down his chin. He's out of control. His face is red. His eyes are wild. He's throwing punches with genuine intent to hurt. Eventually, Sergeant Slaughter hears the noise. He runs in and breaks it up. Bischoff walks out. 10 minutes later, he appears on live TV. No bruises, no visible injuries. WWE pretends nothing happened. And Flair, he faces no punishment. WWE does nothing. Flair is not fired. He is not suspended. He is not disciplined in any way. Why? Because even WWE, a billion-dollar corporation, couldn't control Ric Flair. This is not a story about wrestling. This is a story about 5 real moments where the man behind the Nature Boy persona lost it completely, where scripts were thrown out, where lawsuits were filed, where careers were destroyed, where live TV nearly collapsed. Ric Flair is a legend, 16-time world champion, one of the greatest of all time. But he was also a walking liability, a man who couldn't separate the character from the person, a man who lived the gimmick so hard that reality and performance became the same thing. And when reality bled into the show, no one could stop it. Not Vince McMahon, not WCW management, not producers screaming in his ear. These are the 5 times Ric Flair snapped for real, and the companies he worked for had to scramble just to survive. Moment 1, the Eric Bischoff backstage fight, 2003. Eric Bischoff thought he was safe. By 2003, he was working for WWE. The Monday Night Wars were over. WCW was dead. Bischoff had survived. He was now the on-screen general manager of Monday Night Raw. He had a nice contract, a steady paycheck. Things were good. But Ric Flair didn't forget. 5 years earlier, Bischoff had been the president of WCW, and in 1998, he sued Flair. The lawsuit was over a missed show. Flair had failed to appear at an episode of WCW Thunder. Bischoff wanted to bankrupt him. He said so publicly. In a locker room meeting, Bischoff told Flair he was going to put his family on the street. Those words stayed with Flair. They burned in his mind for 5 years. Flair never forgave him. So when Flair walked into that office in 2003, he wasn't there to talk. He wasn't there to hash things out. He wasn't there for closure. He was there to hurt Eric Bischoff. The details of the fight are messy. Bischoff later said he was sitting down when Flair came in. He was on a conference call. His wife was on the line, his accountant, his lawyer. They were talking about buying property. He thought it was a prank at first, maybe a rib. Wrestling locker rooms are full of pranks, guys messing with each other. Flair told him to stand up. Bischoff hesitated. Then Flair started swinging. Bischoff dodged most of the punches. He had trained in martial arts for years. Kickboxing, taekwondo. He knew how to move. But this wasn't a ring. This was a cramped office. Chairs, a desk, no room to maneuver properly. And Flair was so enraged that he bit his own lip hard enough to draw blood. His face was red. His eyes were wild. He wasn't acting. This wasn't a work. This was Richard Flair, the man, settling a score. Arn Anderson and Coachman were there too. They didn't stop it right away. Maybe they thought Flair deserved this. Maybe they thought Bischoff deserved it. Either way, the fight went on long enough that other people heard it. The noise, the shouting, the sound of furniture moving. Sergeant Slaughter came in and pulled them apart. Flair was still yelling. Bischoff was shaken. His hands were trembling. But within minutes, Bischoff was back on TV. He appeared on Monday Night Raw that same night. No bruises, no visible injuries. WWE pretended nothing happened. And Flair? He faced no punishment. In a normal workplace, this would be grounds for immediate termination, assault, battery, a lawsuit, criminal charges even. But WWE didn't fire Flair. They didn't suspend him. They didn't even publicly acknowledge the fight. Why? Because the WWE locker room hated Eric Bischoff. Bischoff was seen as an outsider, a corporate suit, a guy who tried to destroy the wrestling business in the 1990s. He had nearly put WWE out of business. During the Monday Night Wars, WCW beat WWE in the ratings for 83 consecutive weeks. That was Bischoff's doing. He had favored favored Hulk Hogan and his friends while treating legends like Flair like trash. So when Flair attacked him, many wrestlers saw it as justice, as karma, as long overdue. Flair became an enforcer. He acted out the collective rage of the locker room, and WWE management chose not to punish him because they didn't want to upset the rest of the roster. This was a moment where corporate policy bent to wrestling culture. WWE knew they should fire Flair, but they didn't, because Flair was more valuable to them than discipline. It also revealed something darker. Flair couldn't let go. 5 years had passed. Bischoff was no longer his boss. The lawsuit was settled. WCW was gone. But Flair held on to that grudge like it was a championship belt. And when he had the chance, he acted on it. This wasn't the Nature Boy. This was Richard Flair, angry, bitter, unable to move on, and WWE just covered it up. The incident showed how wrestling operates differently than other businesses. In any other industry, security would have been called. Police might have been involved. HR departments would have launched investigations. Termination papers would have been drawn up. But in wrestling, old grudges matter. Loyalty matters. And sometimes violence is seen as settling a score rather than breaking the law. Flair knew this. He knew the culture protected him. He knew that attacking Bischoff would make him more respected, not less. He was right. The locker room rallied around him. Veterans who remembered the Monday Night Wars saw Flair as a hero, someone who finally gave Bischoff what he deserved. WWE management was caught in the middle. They couldn't punish Flair without alienating their roster. They couldn't ignore the incident without looking weak. So they chose a third option: silence. They swept it under the rug. They told Bischoff to move on. They told Flair to keep his head down. And they hoped no one outside the company would find out. For years it worked. The story only came out later when Bischoff himself talked about it on podcasts and interviews. By then, both men had moved on. But the incident remained a perfect example of Flair's volatility. He didn't care about consequences. He didn't care about his job. He cared about respect, about legacy, about settling old scores. And when someone disrespected him, he fought back. Literally. Bischoff later said he wasn't surprised by the attack. He knew Flair hated him. He knew the history. What surprised him was that it took so long. 5 years. 5 years of working in the same building. 5 years of passing each other in hallways. And then one day Flair decided it was time. That's what made Flair dangerous. He didn't forget. He didn't forgive. And when the moment came, he acted. Moment 2, the 2K14 Symposium Meltdown, 2013. August 2013, Los Angeles. SummerSlam weekend. WWE is hosting a promotional event for the WWE 2K14 video game. It's a big deal. 2K Sports is the new publisher. They've replaced THQ. They've flown in executives from New York, from California. The event is called a symposium. It's supposed to be professional, polished, a marketing win. WWE puts together a panel of legends and current stars: Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mick Foley, CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, and Ric Flair. Jim Ross is the moderator. His job is to keep the panel on track, answer questions about the game, talk about the product, talk about the new features, the improved graphics, the roster, make 2K Sports happy. But Ric Flair shows up drunk, not tipsy, not slightly buzzed, drunk, visibly intoxicated, slurring his words, swaying in his chair. Some people in the audience later described him as drunk as fuck. The panel starts. Flair immediately ignores the questions. Someone asks about the game's graphics. Flair starts telling rambling stories from his past, stories that have nothing to do with the video game, stories about matches from the 1980s. Jim Ross tries to steer him back on topic. Flair ignores him. Then Flair starts saying things WWE doesn't want anyone to hear. He makes comments about John Cena being a hardcore drinker. This is a problem because WWE promotes Cena as a family-friendly role model, the face of the company, a guy who visits children in hospitals, who grants Make-A-Wish requests. Flair is undermining that image in front of sponsors. Then Flair starts talking about his son. Reid Flair had died earlier that year, March 2013. Drug overdose, heroin. He was 25 years old. Tragic, heartbreaking. Flair was clearly still grieving, still processing, still broken. But instead of processing that grief privately, he unloaded it in front of a live audience, in front of 2K Sports executives, in front of the press, in front of cameras. He talked about Reid's death in graphic, uncomfortable detail, how he found out, what he felt, the guilt, the pain. The audience didn't know how to react. Some people shifted in their seats. Others looked away. Some looked at the floor. It was raw. It was real. But it was also completely inappropriate for a corporate marketing event. Jim Ross tried to regain control. He asked another panelist a question. Flair interrupted. Ross tried again. Flair kept talking. The panel became a disaster. Daniel Bryan looked uncomfortable. CM Punk looked annoyed. Stone Cold Steve Austin tried to lighten the mood with a joke. It didn't work. Flair kept going. When the event ended, WWE executives were furious. Vince McMahon was disgusted. 2K Sports was unhappy. They had paid for a professional event. They had flown people in. They had arranged press coverage. Instead, they got a drunken therapy session. Someone had to take the fall. It wasn't Ric Flair, it was Jim Ross. WWE fired Jim Ross within weeks. Publicly, they called it a retirement, but everyone knew the truth. Ross was fired because he couldn't control Flair. He was the moderator. He was supposed to be in charge. He was the conductor of the runaway train. And when the train derailed, WWE blamed him. Flair faced no real consequences. He was temporarily pulled from promotional duties for a few months. But within months, he was back. Same role, same ambassador status. Nothing changed. This was a pattern. Flair caused the problem. Someone else paid the price. Jim Ross later admitted he felt like he had failed. He said he should have ended the segment. He should have been more forceful. He should have cut Flair off. But how do you stop Ric Flair when he's drunk and grieving and doesn't care about the script? You can't, and that's the problem. Flair was impossible to manage. He brought value to WWE. He was a legend, a draw, a name that sold tickets and video games. But he was also a risk, a liability, a man who could destroy a corporate event because he showed up intoxicated and chose to air his pain in public. WWE learned a lesson that day. Never put Flair in an uncontrolled environment. Never trust him to stay on message. And if something goes wrong, blame someone else. Jim Ross became the scapegoat. Flair walked away untouched. The symposium became infamous in wrestling circles. Fans who attended talked about it for years. Videos circulated online. People analyzed every word Flair said, every uncomfortable moment, every time he interrupted someone. What made it worse was the context. Reed's death had devastated Flair. He was drinking more. He was struggling. He was in pain, and WWE put him on a public stage anyway. Some people blame WWE for not recognizing the warning signs, for not canceling Flair's appearance, for putting profits over his well-being, for not caring about his mental state. Others blame Flair for showing up drunk, for not having the self-control to stay sober for one event, for embarrassing himself in the company, for making it about him instead of the product. But the truth is more complicated. Flair was a man in pain, a father who had lost his son, and he used the only stage he knew to process that pain: the wrestling ring, the microphone, the audience. It didn't matter that this was a corporate event. It didn't matter that sponsors were watching. It didn't matter that his job was on the line. When Flair had a microphone, he said what he felt. And what he felt was grief, anger, confusion, loss, regret. WWE wanted the Nature Boy. They got Richard Flair, and they couldn't handle it. The firing of Jim Ross sent a message to everyone else. If Flair goes off script, it's your fault for not stopping him, not Flair's fault for doing it. This created a culture of fear around Flair. No one wanted to moderate him. No one wanted to be responsible for him, because if he lost it, you lost your job. Moment 3, the Ambrose Asylum suicide remark, 2016, April 2016, WWE SmackDown, pre-recorded episode. The segment is called The Ambrose Asylum. It's a talk show segment hosted by Dean Ambrose. The guests are Charlotte Flair and Natalya. They're feuding, a women's championship rivalry. It's a standard wrestling promo, nothing complicated. The topic turns to legacy, family history. Natalya talks about her uncle, Bret Hart, the Hitman, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, 5-time WWE champion, technical master. It's a natural talking point. The Hart family and the Flair family have history, professional rivalry, wrestling philosophy differences. It's been going on for decades. Ric Flair is also on the segment. He's there to support his daughter, Charlotte. She's the women's champion, the top star of the division. Flair is her manager, her mouthpiece, her hype man. The conversation is supposed to be scripted insults, typical wrestling trash talk. You're not as good as your family. Your legacy is fake. The usual stuff. Then Flair snaps. Natalya mentions Bret Hart. She talks about his legacy, his accomplishments, his technical skill. Flair doesn't like it. He doesn't respond with a scripted line. Instead, he looks at Natalya and says, "Kill yourself." The arena goes silent. Kill yourself. 2 words, clear, direct, not a joke, not a slip of the tongue, not a botched line. Flair said it with conviction, with anger, with genuine malice. This is a massive problem. WWE has a public anti-bullying campaign called Be a Star, Stand Up, Support, Take Action, Respect. They partner with schools. They promote mental health awareness. They have wellness policies for their talent. They run public service announcements. And now one of their most visible ambassadors just told someone to commit suicide on live television. Except it wasn't live television. SmackDown was pre-recorded at the time, taped on Tuesdays, aired on Thursdays. So WWE's production team had a choice. They could air it, or they could cut it. They cut it. The line was scrubbed from the broadcast, edited out. Fans watching at home never heard it, but fans in the arena did, and they recorded it. Cell phone videos. They posted it online, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube. Videos went viral on social media. WWE was forced into damage control. This incident exposed a fundamental flaw in how WWE used Flair. He was a 67-year-old man who came from an era era where insults were personal and unfiltered, where wrestlers cut promos with genuine heat, where the goal was to make people hate you. He didn't think in terms of PR. He didn't consider wellness policies. He didn't think about sponsors. When he got emotional, he said what he felt. And what he felt was rage toward the Hart family. The rivalry between Flair and the Harts wasn't just storyline. It was real. It went back decades. Bret Hart had criticized Flair's work rate. He said Flair relied on the same match formula, the same spots, the same finish. He said Flair wasn't a technical wrestler, that he was overrated. Flair fired back. He said the Harts were bitter and jealous, that they couldn't draw money like he could, that they took wrestling too seriously, that they lacked charisma, decades of professional tension, decades of resentment, decades of buried anger. So when Natalya brought up Bret's name, Flair didn't see a storyline. He didn't see a script. He saw an insult, a shot at his legacy, and he responded with something cruel. WWE quietly addressed it backstage. Flair was spoken to, told it was inappropriate, told not to do it again, but again, no public punishment, no suspension, no apology issued by Flair himself. This was a pattern. Flair said something unacceptable. WWE covered it up. Life moved on, but the damage was done. Fans knew what he said. Social media knew. And WWE's image as a family-friendly company took a hit. The irony is thick. WWE spent years building an anti-bullying brand. They partnered with schools. They ran campaigns. They told kids to stand up against bullying. They promoted kindness, respect, mental health awareness. And then Ric Flair, one of their ambassadors, told someone to kill themselves on TV. It didn't matter that the line was cut. It didn't matter that WWE scrubbed it. The internet never forgets. Fans recorded it. They shared it. They talked about it. They criticized WWE for using Flair, for not controlling him, for letting him be on TV in the first place. WWE had to explain why one of their legends said something so harmful. They had no good answer. The truth was simple. Flair couldn't control himself. When he got angry, when old grudges surfaced, he said whatever came to mind. In the 1980s, that might have been fine. Wrestling was different then. Insults were harsher. Standards were lower. No one cared about corporate image. But in 2016, WWE was a publicly traded company. They had sponsors. They had partnerships with anti-bullying organizations. They had a reputation to protect. Flair didn't care about any of that. He cared about the Harts, about defending his legacy, about winning the argument, about not letting them get the last word. And in that moment, he forgot where he was. He forgot the cameras. He forgot the wellness policies. He forgot the Be a Star campaign. He just reacted, and WWE had to clean up the mess. The incident also hurt Natalya. She was put in an awkward position. She couldn't respond. She couldn't defend herself because the line was cut. On TV, it looked like she just stood there. But in the arena, she heard it, and it hurt. Later, she talked about how uncomfortable it was, how she didn't know what to do, how she wanted to respond but couldn't break character. WWE apologized to her privately, but publicly, they said nothing, because acknowledging it would have made it a bigger story, so they hoped it would go away. It didn't. Fans brought it up for years. Every time Flair appeared on TV, someone mentioned it. Every time WWE promoted their anti-bullying campaigns, someone pointed out the hypocrisy. And Flair, he never apologized, never acknowledged it, never addressed it, because to him, it wasn't a big deal. It was just wrestling, just a promo, just words, but words matter, especially when you tell someone to kill themselves. Moment 4, the real world champion, belt theft, 1991. Ric Flair is the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. He works for WCW, World Championship Wrestling, owned by Ted Turner, based in Atlanta. He's the face of the company, the creative centerpiece, the top guy, the main event. Then Jim Herd, the president of WCW, proposes something insane. Herd wants Flair to change his gimmick, get rid of the nature boy persona, cut his hair into a buzz cut, wear an earring, become a Roman gladiator named Spartacus. Spartacus. Flair refuses. This isn't just a bad creative idea. This is an insult. Flair has spent decades building the nature boy character. Since the 1970s, it's worth millions. It's his identity, his brand, his legacy, and now some corporate executive from the fast food industry wants to destroy it. Jim Herd had no wrestling background. He came from Pizza Hut. He was hired to modernize WCW, to make it more corporate, more professional, but he didn't understand wrestling. He didn't understand the business. He didn't understand Ric Flair. Contract negotiations stall. Herd tells Flair he's not needed anymore, that WCW can survive without him. Flair is stunned. He's the world champion. The company revolves around him. He's been the face of the NWA for years. How can he be surplus? Then Flair remembers something. Under NWA rules, rules, the world champion had to post a $25,000 security deposit. This deposit guaranteed the champion would return the physical belt when they lost the title. Flair had posted that deposit years earlier, in the 1980s, and he had never gotten it back. He also owned the belt itself, or at least he believed he did. Flair had personally paid for the creation of the big gold belt. It was crafted by silversmith Charles Crumrine, custom made. Flair considered it his property, his belt. So when Flair asked WCW to return his deposit, Hurd refused. According to reports, Hurd used derogatory language and told Flair to keep the belt. He didn't think Flair would actually do it. Big mistake. Flair contacted Vince McMahon. He arranged a debut on WWF television. World Wrestling Federation, WWE's old name, the rival company, the enemy, and he brought the NWA Championship belt with him. This was unprecedented. A reigning world champion from one company appearing on a rival company's show, holding their physical championship belt, wearing it, carrying it, claiming to be the real world champion. It was chaos. WCW and the NWA immediately filed lawsuits. They wanted the belt back. They wanted to stop Flair from appearing on WWF TV with it. They wanted injunctions, restraining orders. Legal teams scrambled. Lawyers filed motions. The WWF had to get creative. They couldn't show the belt clearly on TV. Legal risks, copyright issues, trademark problems. So they used digital pixelation to blur it. A fuzzy mess on screen. They called it the Real World Championship. Fans knew it was the WCW belt, but WWF couldn't legally display it clearly. Then WWF created a substitute. They took a blue-strap tag team belt and modified it with gold plating. It looked vaguely like a world title, big and gold, but not the same. Flair carried it on TV while the legal battle continued. Eventually, a replica was commissioned, called the Vegas Big Gold. It was a fake version used for promotional photos, magazine covers, posters, anything to avoid showing the real belt and risking further litigation. The standoff lasted months. Finally, Flair and WCW reached a settlement. Flair returned the belt. In exchange, he received approximately $40,000. His original deposit plus interest plus legal fees, but the damage was done. This incident changed how wrestling companies handled championship belts forever. After Flair, contracts became ironclad. Security deposits were phased out. Companies made it clear that belts were company property, not personal possessions. Wrestlers signed agreements, clauses about returning belts, penalties for not returning them. Flair's defection also created one of the most awkward moments in wrestling history. WWF had to promote their new star without being able to show the title that made him a star. They had to blur it, substitute it, hide it. WCW looked weak for losing their champion. They looked incompetent, like they couldn't manage their own talent, like they didn't know what they were doing. The NWA looked disorganized for failing to enforce their own rules. Their champion defected, their belt was gone, and they couldn't get it back. And Flair? He walked away with his money and a new contract, a guaranteed deal with WWF. He held an entire industry hostage because he believed the belt was his. The belt theft was more than just a contract dispute. It was a statement. Flair was saying that the old rules still mattered, that a champion owned his legacy, that no corporate executive could take that away. In the territory days, champions had power, real power. They drew the crowds. They made the money. They decided who won and lost. Promoters needed them more than they needed the promoters. But by 1991, wrestling was changing. WCW was owned by Ted Turner, a billionaire, a media mogul. WWF was becoming a corporate empire. Vince McMahon was building a monopoly. The business was moving away from the old territory system. Flair didn't accept that. He still believed in the old rules. And when WCW tried to force him out, he used those old rules against them. The deposit, the belt, the NWA bylaws. Flair knew the system because he had lived in it for decades, and he exploited every loophole he could find. WWF benefited from this chaos. They got one of the biggest stars in wrestling. They got legitimacy. They got a story that wrote itself. Real world champion. The man WCW couldn't afford to keep. WCW looked terrible. They lost their champion. They lost face. They looked like amateurs who couldn't manage their own talent. And the NWA, they were exposed as powerless. Their champion defected with their belt, and they couldn't do anything about it. Flair won, but he also burned bridges. WCW never fully trusted him again. When he returned years later, there was always tension, always the fear that he might go rogue again, that he might take something else, that he might walk out. Because once you prove you can't be controlled, people never forget. The belt itself became legendary. The big gold belt, one of the most iconic championship belts in wrestling history. Eventually, WCW used it again. WWF used it. WWE used it. It became a symbol, a prize, a legacy. But it started with Flair, with his refusal to give it back, with his belief that it was his. And for a few months in 1991, he was right. Moment 5, the Randy Orton promo. Breakdown 2020, August 10th, 2020. Monday Night Raw, WWE Performance Center, Orlando, Florida, COVID-19 pandemic. No live audience. Wrestling shows are being filmed in an empty arena. Just wrestlers, referees, cameramen, producers. It's intimate, quiet. Everything feels more personal. Every word matters more. Randy Orton is running a storyline where he's attacking legends. The legend killer gimmick. He's done it before. Early in his career. Now he's doing it again. Older, more vicious, more brutal. One of his targets is Ric Flair. The story is simple. Orton, Flair's former student, is going to brutally assault him. Flair will be written off TV. Storyline injury. It's a standard wrestling angle. Happens all the time. The script is clear. Flair comes out. Orton insults him. Calls him washed up. Past his prime. A has-been. Flair gives a brief response. Maybe 30 seconds. Defends himself. Then Orton hits him with a low blow. A cheap shot. Then Orton delivers a punt kick to the head. His finisher. Lights go out. Show ends. Simple, clean, effective. But Flair doesn't follow the script. He's supposed to say a few lines. Maybe 30 seconds of dialogue. A minute at most. Instead, he launches into an unscripted 5-minute monologue. Maybe longer. He talks about his love for the business. How wrestling saved his life. How it gave him purpose. His pride in his daughter Charlotte's success. How she's better than he ever was. His affection for Randy Orton. How proud he is of him. His regrets as a father. How he failed his family. His desire to be a better mentor to Orton than he was to his own kids. It's emotional, sincere, powerful, raw. It's also a disaster for WWE's production team. Backstage, producers are panicking. Every second is accounted for in a live TV broadcast. Commercial breaks, segments, match times, credits. Everything is timed to the second. Flair is consuming time that was meant for the punt kick, for the closing credits, for the final commercial break, for the show to end on time. They give him hand signals. Wrap it up. Cut to the finish. Hurry up. Flair ignores them. He doesn't see them. Or he sees them and doesn't care. Randy Orton is standing in the ring. He's supposed to be a villain, a heel, the bad guy, cold, ruthless, emotionless. But Flair's speech is so genuine that Orton visibly struggles to stay in character. His eyes are watering, his jaw is clenched. He later admitted he almost broke down. He didn't know if he should interrupt or just let Flair keep going. The segment stretches on. 5 minutes, 6 minutes. The production team is sweating. Producers are yelling into headsets. Directors are watching the clock. If this goes too long, the show will cut off before the climax. The punt kick might not air. The lights might not dim in time. The broadcast window will close. Finally, Flair finishes. Orton delivers the punt kick. The lights go out. Darkness. The show ends. Seconds before the broadcast window closes. Literally, seconds. Fans loved it. The promo is now considered one of the most poignant moments of Flair's late career. It felt real, because it was real. Flair wasn't acting. He was a 71-year-old man reflecting on his life, on his failures, on his regrets, on his love for wrestling, on everything he sacrificed for the business. But from a production standpoint, it was a nightmare. WWE lost control. They couldn't stop him. They couldn't cut away. They couldn't go to commercial. They just had to let Flair talk and hope the show didn't run over. This moment captured everything about Flair. When he felt something deeply, he couldn't hide it. The script didn't matter. The timing didn't matter. The producers didn't matter. What mattered was the emotion. Flair loved Randy Orton. That was real. He saw Orton as a son, as a protege, as someone who carried his legacy. And this storyline, where Orton was turning on him, where Orton was attacking him, hit Flair hard, emotionally. So when he got in that ring, he didn't think about the script. He thought about his real feelings, his real regrets, his real love for the business and for Orton, his real failures as a father. And he poured it all out. The producers couldn't stop him because stopping him would have ruined the moment. The audience at home didn't know this was unscripted. They just saw a powerful, emotional promo from a legend, a 71-year-old man saying goodbye. But backstage, it was chaos. Headsets were buzzing. Directors were yelling. Producers were counting seconds. Time was running out. Orton later said he had no idea what to do. He couldn't interrupt. That would have killed the moment, ruined the emotion. But he also couldn't just stand there forever. He had to wait for Flair to finish and hope it happened in time. It did, barely. The show ended on time. The punt kick happened. The angle worked. The lights went out. Fade to black. But WWE learned another lesson. Even at 71, Flair was unpredictable. Even when he wasn't drunk. Even when he wasn't angry. Even when the moment was supposed to be simple. When emotion hit him, he followed it. And no producer, no script, no hand signal could stop him. The promo became legendary. Fans shared it online. Wrestling websites wrote about it. Podcasts analyzed it. It was genuine. Real. A moment where Richard Flair, the man, spoke instead of Ric Flair, the character. And that's what made it powerful. powerful, but also dangerous, because WWE couldn't control when that would happen, when Flair would break script, when emotion would take over. They got lucky that night. The show ended on time. The angle worked. But it could have been a disaster. If Flair had talked for another minute, the broadcast would have cut off. The punt kick wouldn't have aired. The story wouldn't have finished. And WWE would have looked incompetent. Again, conclusion. The man they couldn't control. Ric Flair is a legend. 16-time world champion. One of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. Hall of Famer, a cultural icon, the Nature Boy, but he was also impossible to manage. These 5 moments prove it. The Eric Bischoff fight, the 2K14 symposium, the suicide remark, the belt theft, the Randy Orton promo. Each one is a case study in what happens when a performer refuses to separate reality from performance. Flair didn't just play the Nature Boy, he became the Nature Boy. He lived the gimmick, the robes, the Rolexes, the limousines, the Learjets, the ego, the need for validation. It was all real. And when reality clashed with corporate expectations, reality won every time. WWE couldn't fire him. He was too valuable, too iconic, too connected to wrestling history, too important to the business. So they learned to survive him. They hired handlers. They tightened scripts. They fired scapegoats like Jim Ross. They scrubbed footage. They blurred championship belts. They panicked backstage while he hijacked live TV. But they never truly controlled him, because Flair came from a different era, the territory days, when wrestlers governed themselves, when champions owned their gimmicks, when a man's reputation mattered more than a corporate brand, when handshake deals meant something, when respect was earned, not given. Flair carried that mentality into the modern era, and it created friction, legal battles, PR nightmares, backstage assaults, drunken meltdowns, unscripted promos, stolen championship belts. But it also created authenticity. When Flair cried in the ring with Randy Orton, it was real. When he attacked Eric Bischoff, it was real. When he held the NWA title hostage, it was real. When he broke down at the symposium, it was real. These weren't worked shoots. These weren't angles. These were moments where Richard Flair, the man, bled through Ric Flair, the character, and audiences felt it. That's why WWE kept him. That's why WCW kept him. That's why, despite everything, Flair remained employed. Because when he lost it, when he went off script, when he ignored the producers and said what he felt, it was more compelling than anything a writer could script. In the end, wrestling companies didn't control Ric Flair. They learned to manage the damage, to build systems strong enough to withstand his outbursts, to accept that when you hired Ric Flair, you hired the whole package, the legend and the liability. Ric Flair was the last of a dying breed, a wrestler who refused to be tamed, who lived his gimmick every single day, who believed the championship belt was his, who fought co-workers in private offices, who showed up drunk to corporate events, who hijacked live broadcasts to pour his heart out. He was uncontrollable, and that's what made him the man.